Right. Partner ready?
Yep.
Opponents ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? Judges. My time starts now. With conflicts rising in countries all around the world, it is hard to say that the only way to solve them is through more conflict, and it is even harder to say that the most effective way to solving them is even more conflict. My partner and I are here today to tell you why these conflicts should not be met by war, but with peace and diplomacy, and why we affirm the resolution that on balance, diplomacy has better maintained peace than military power, for these reasons. Our first contention is that diplomacy saves lives and money. To state the obvious, war kills. And not only do soldiers die of violent deaths, but innocent civilians do as well. In World War II, over 30 million innocent civilians perished due to the war. In the Vietnam War, 3 million people lost their lives in the fighting, which has devastated the country, especially since that war was never resolved. The Vietnam War cost the U.S. $3 trillion adjusted to inflation, proving the point that war is extremely expensive. This is an example of how war cripples economies and their society for long periods of time. Because of these reasons, wars have severely negative impacts on countries. Diplomacy resolves the underlying issues as well as saves lives and money, and this leads into our next contention. Foreign aid secures peace and helps the economy. Foreign aid can come in many different forms, such as developmental assistance, humanitarian assistance, disbursements, bilateral and multilateral aid, all of which restore the economy and the well-being of people. For example, the U.S. has spent $35 billion in foreign aid for South Korea after the Korean War, a war that left South Korea without a stable government or economy. Since then, foreign aid has brought the country to a point where there is a stable democratic government and a good economy. The U.S. has even made a new business partner with them, and they are now the United States' 10th largest export market, making back the $35 billion annually in exports. This is just one example of many times the foreign aid has helped countries. Foreign aid helps countries to have a functioning economy and government. It also helps governments the ability to establish themselves and stop insurgencies. Another way that foreign aid helps people is that it can force countries to put in place human rights and fair democratic rule by either withholding or granting extra aid based on actions. And it does not only help the recipient of the aid, it adds to the economy of the entire world. Finally, our last contention is that diplomacy is more effective than war because it brings long-lasting peace. With the main causes of war being inequalities among groups, poor economic opportunities, and deficient societies, it is hard not to see why military confrontation is counterproductive towards stopping these conflicts from arising. For one, we have already proved that war costs extreme amounts of money, which cripples the economy, and then it cripples the society because of the loss of lives. Both of these facts only contribute to the consequences to the conflict and lead to more wars. Diplomacy does not have these consequences. In fact, it solves these issues and thus sets up the posterity with a society where these problems are no longer there, or at least significantly smaller. Diplomacy has the ability to do this because it can solve these problems directly and sets up long-lasting alliances, rather than military force, which almost always results in a state in ruins and an outside force trying to replace it, only causing more war. All of these reasons show why diplomacy provides long-lasting solutions to issues that would only be amplified by war. It is because economies, governments, and the lives of people are dependent on the answer of this resolution that we urge you to vote on the side of peace talks rather than brutality and violence. We urge you to vote pro on the ballot. Thank you.
Anybody need prep time before process?
No.
Second speaker?
Okay, so do you have any other examples on how foreign aid helped a country helped another country as greatly as South Korea, as the U.S. helped South Korea?
I'm not sure if it is as greatly as South Korea. South Korea is a prime example of how, when it's done right, it can be very effective, and obviously it adds to the economy of everyone. Another example, well, logically, if someone's giving you large humanitarian assistance or sums of money that could help you establish yourself, of course there's going to be prime examples of how this would help countries around the world.
Okay, Are you saying that diplomacy has no consequences at all?
I'm not saying that it has no consequences. I'm saying that the consequences are not as severe as military action.
Okay, and how does it solve problems directly?
You mean diplomacy?
Yeah.
Because when you come to a compromise, it's not that they're simply sending in troops. They're actually negotiating what is wrong with what started the conflict, what's wrong with the country as it is, and that can all be solved with diplomacy rather than military action, which, as I said before, often results in the state in ruins and an outside force trying to replace it.
Do you agree that sometimes people are not satisfied with a compromise?
Yes, but that can always be renegotiated, and that's the beauty of diplomacy, is that it can be tried again and again, where military power cannot.
Okay. Where did you get the $3 trillion spent on Vietnam?
That was the Defense Department.
Okay. And are other war costs around the same thing? Around the same?
Probably, yes. I mean, if not more.
Just time.
Okay, partner ready? Opponents ready? Judges ready?
Yep.
Okay, my time starts now. There is a big problem going on now in the world, and that is that the countries of the world don't know which type of power to use, soft power or hard power. Hi, my name is David Liu, and I'm representing the con side of this debate. My side states that using hard power or a combination of both soft and hard power is better than only using soft power. Using hard power is using militaristic forces against countries that are misbehaving or breaking laws, and soft power is using unforceful ways, like impacting economy, against countries that are misbehaving. The right way to go is to either use only hard power or a mix of both soft and hard power. An example of the U.S. doing this is when they fought in the Iraq War in 2003. The Iraqi military was using missiles and chemical weapons to attack tankers near the Persian Gulf, so the U.S. fought back using their military power to end this type of behavior from the Iraqi government. My first contention is that using only soft power can be very ineffective and slow. When using only soft power, other countries still might not cooperate with you, so you need to use some sort of hard power to make them have no choice but to cooperate with you. Only using soft power also doesn't even give the misbehaving country a reason to stop misbehaving. So the country will just continue their bad behaviors, or they will continue even worse ones. This could end up killing hundreds or even thousands of innocent people. My second contention is that deterrence is a very good form of hard power to use against other countries. Deterrence is the act of discouraging another action through installing doubt or fear. The government of a country could show the other countries who are performing bad actions their military and all of their power, so that the disobeying countries would be afraid of them and the consequences of their actions. Deterrence is also a good way to use power non-violently, because deterrence is showing other countries your power and not necessarily using it against them. This can help to eliminate bad behaviors while not harming anyone. In conclusion, using hard power or a mixture of both soft and hard power is more effective and fast than only using soft power. Thank you for listening to our speech, Judge, and please vote con.
Anybody need prep for process?
No.
Actually, can we take 10 seconds? Ask him how that works.
All right.
Can you write that down? That's 10 seconds.
Yeah. Can you
Subtract when you're talking.
10 seconds.
Yeah.
Cross-X starts now. So you said that a combination of both hard power and soft power would result in the best results, correct?
Well, that or only hard power.
And what would the soft power do when mixed with hard power?
Well, what the soft power would do is, instead of only using hard power against another country, the soft power, because it's not as effective or fast as hard power, you sort of use soft power, and if that doesn't work 100%, then you need to use hard power, which happens most of the time when dealing with other countries. You need to use hard power to help ensure that an impact happens.
So would you say that treaties or alliances after wars are an example of soft power?
Well, yes.
So would you say that soft power ends the wars?
No, because after a war, people put on treaties. And what happens is most treaties after wars are broken because the one side of the treaty doesn't think it's fair. So that ends up resulting in another war. So the treaties based off of diplomacy cause more wars.
Do treaties always break after wars?
No, I never said they did.
Well, do you think that the treaties break because of the negotiation or because of the war?
Because of the negotiation.
Do you think that deterrence has no consequences?
I think that deterrence could lead to consequences, but most of the time, because each side is building up their weapons, that they are scared of each other and the consequences of them engaging in a fight. So I don't think that deterrence has consequences most of the time, but rarely they might.
Do you think that deterrence, such as an arms race, would result in a larger war? If
No,
ever
like
broke out?
I just said, they're competing to have better weapons, and what happens is they're scared of each other,
But
so they know if they engage
think
in a
if-
fight.
If fighting ever broke out in an arms race, would the war be worse than it would before?
Yes, it would, but that is very unlikely.
That-
Prep time for negative attack.
Can I have? So in my opponent's first contention, they said that diplomacy saves lives and money. However, it only saves lives if it manages to stop war. And military force can do the same thing, which we already stated in our case. So it is not a unique. It does not really work. So it works for both of our cases. And for the money part, they stated that they did not know the cost for other wars, and it's possible that it could vary quite a bit between vary quite a bit from Vietnam. In their second contention, they stated that diplomacy can lead to foreign aid, which leads to which can improve certain countries' economies. However, the example they provided of South Korea is one example, and that does not mean that it always works. Also, South Korea, that's probably a quite unique. They stated in cross-examination that South Korea is what happens when you do it right. However, people, it's not very common that people do things completely right. People will mess up. They also say, there are examples on how foreign aid do not work, such as Taiwan would pay large sums of money to other countries to try and get them to be noticed instead of China, which did not work as well as they hoped. In their third contention, they said it brings long-lasting peace. However, because war cripples economy and society. However, we already said that military force does not necessarily lead to war. And diplomacy, in the instances that military force did lead to war, that's usually because diplomacy failed. And because of these reasons, I hope you will con.
Any prep time before process?
Let me see.
So John,
Okay. Yeah, okay. I think I'm good.
okay.
Alright, the cross-ex will start now. You said that soft power only saves lives if it stops the war, right?
Or if it prevents it from happening, yeah.
Yeah, but then if you use military power during a war, wouldn't that only be possible once the war starts?
We were talking about using military force to maintain peace, not after a war has started.
I know, but I'm talking about during the war. Wouldn't you say with soft power you could prevent the war before it even happens by negotiating and making a win-win situation?
You can do that with hard power too.
How would you be able to do that with hard power? With hard power, you're imposing yourself on the other country, and when you impose yourself on the other country, then it's a win-lose situation. You win, they lose.
Well, compromises aren't always win-win either, but deterrence is what we mentioned in our case already.
Well, wouldn't you say deterrence is really just translates to a stalemate?
No.
So you're saying like deterrence being like two countries and their military powers countering each other so that no actions can be taken. You're saying that's not a stalemate?
That's one example, but it can also be one country's military is obviously greater than the other, so it's not.
So let's say one country's military is greater than the other. Wouldn't that encourage other countries to build up their military?
Do they have the time?
What do you mean, do they have the time? Countries have all the time in the world.
Yeah, but with an imminent threat, do they have time to build up a military?
Yeah, but still, now in this status quo, wouldn't you say America and Russia are like America and Russia? They have the most nuclear warheads. Am I right?
Yes.
And because America is threatening to countries like North Korea, wouldn't you say that would be the reason that North Korea is trying to manufacture their nuclear weapons?
Possibly.
So, if that's true, then wouldn't that mean that deterrence would also lead to an arms race?
That's time.
For affirmative attack.
Yeah, no, I'm good for the attack. All right, attack speech will start now. So in their intro, they said that hard power or soft power and hard power is better than soft power. But but for the hard power and soft power, I'd like to argue that the hard power is actually just supporting the soft power. Let's say you're building a house, right? And then the soft power are the nails, and the hard power is the hammers. If you take away the soft power, you just have a hammer, and that hammer does nothing but destroy. If you just use hard power, you're just destroying, and you're creating tension. And now moving on, in their first contention, they said that only soft power may be slow, and I agree. It may be slower and a little less active than direct military force, but the effects afterwards are better. When you utilize soft power in solving a conflict, you're finding win-win situations in which both you and the opposing country both gain something. And when you both have mutual gain, then it creates alliances, strong alliances that won't be broken by small military conflicts. They also said that when you only use soft power, you have no consequences. And this isn't true because if you only use soft power, you don't have to use military action as a consequence. You could just put something like, let's say, an economic sanction on them, or you could cut them off from an alliance and then weaken their military. And now moving on, in their second contention, they said that deterrence is a good way to use hard power without killing anybody. But I'd like to bring up a little point. I'd like to bring up a little point called a powder keg. Imagine there's a powder keg, and this deterrence causes a stalemate, and the tension from that stalemate adds the gunpowder to that powder keg. And let's say that this stalemate encourages other countries to build up their militaries to try to break that stalemate. And that's called an arms race. And this arms race adds more and more tension to that powder keg. And that powder keg just keeps on building up tension, more and more tension, until it just blows up into a giant world war. And this giant world war would be catastrophic, especially now in our status quo, where the world is filled with weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear weapons. This a full-blown world war would end in a nuclear war. And a nuclear war, the consequences would be catastrophic. They also said in their cross-ex that treaties They also said in their cross-ex that treaties result from war. And I'd like to argue that since those treaties result from war and they're broken, I'd like to argue that they're broken because of the bitterness after the loss from the war. And after that loss from the war, that just creates more war because they make treaties, and those treaties are broken by bitterness and hate, and then that bitterness and hate just creates another war, more and more war. So these wars just make more war. And also I'd like to bring up this little point. If you just use hard power, it makes other people bitter and hate you. For example, the war on terrorism in the Middle East. If we just use hard power, go in there, guns a-blazing, just shooting up all the terrorists, those terrorists will die as martyrs. Those terrorists will die as martyrs who stood up for something they believed in. And when you kill a martyr, more people join. You kill one terrorist, 2 more join. Kill those 2, 4 more join. Kill those 4, 8 more join, until the terrorist threat just grows. And this is why, Judge, you must vote an affirmative.
Okay, so you said that when using soft and hard power, the hard power supports the soft power. And could you give me a reason why that is true?
Because diplomacy, if a strong military force is backing up diplomacy, then that diplomacy will mean more to other countries. And that military force is helping to drive the diplomacy in.
Okay, I agree with that point truly, but what you guys are trying to prove is that using only soft power is right and no hard power. So you just contradicted your own.
No, I'm not saying that using soft power and hard power is wrong. I'm just saying in that instance, soft power is the greater.
Yeah, so that's not a real claim or reason why you're right. So that point is invalid.
I'd actually like to argue against that, because I'm saying that in this instance where hard and soft power are being used at the same time, soft power has the greater impact. Therefore, soft power is better at maintaining the peace than hard power is.
And
hard power is just driving the point through. Soft power is actually doing the work of making the point and convincing the other countries.
But you're proving that soft power mixed with another type of power is greater than only that type of power by itself. So you're still not.
But am I
helping to
saying that
prove your
soft
point.
power is ineffective?
No, you're
I'm
not.
just saying it can be more effective while using
So you just contradicted yourself.
No, I'm not contradicting
You're
myself.
saying that using only soft power is better than using either only hard power or a mixture of both
That's
soft
not
and
the
hard.
argument. The
So
argument
you
is
just
that
helped
soft power is more effective in maintaining peace. And
Yeah.
I can say that hard power supports soft power in that instance, but
And that
I'm
helps
arguing that
us.
soft power has the better driving force in that instance. So I can argue that hard power can help soft power,
Okay,
but I'm
so-
still arguing that soft
So
power
that
is better
helps
than hard
us,
power
but
in that
going on to
instance.
my next question, you said that the use of only soft power does leave consequences because you can put a sanction on their economy. But isn't an economic sanction a form of hard power?
It is a form of hard power.
Yes, so why did you bring that up as a form of diplomacy?
I'm not bringing it up as a form of diplomacy. Like I said, I'm saying that soft power and hard power are working together. This is a form of soft power and hard power working together. Soft power sets up the basis of what should be done. The soft power does the greater work, and hard power is what drives that forward.
Okay,
the
so-
economic sanction is
so-
driving the point forward.
Okay. Everyone ready? My time starts now. In my opponent's attack case, they said they attacked my first contention on diplomacy saving lives and money by saying that it only saves lives if it stops the war, saying that it only saves lives when it is successful, proving the point that it does save lives and money. They also said that I did not know the cost of other wars, and that is why my economy section is not valid. Of course, I do not need to know every cost of each war to make the point that wars are extremely expensive. Of course, they're extremely expensive. You need to supply all your troops with food. You need to actually manufacture tanks, aircrafts, missiles. It's extremely expensive. On the second contention, they said that I only cited one example of when foreign aid works. Well, Japan was another example of when foreign aid had worked, and they had after World War II. Also, they said that that it was only a good example because it was done correctly, or that foreign aid was successful. Of course, that's still proving the point that it is successful in improving the economy and governments of other countries. They also cited Taiwan as an example that did not work, but the majority of examples have worked with foreign aid. My third contention, they said that the military force does not necessarily lead to war, and that military leads to war when diplomacy fails. Of course, this is not attacking anything that I said in my third contention on that it provides long-lasting peace. This is just saying that it does not. This is just another defense saying that it does not actually lead to war. Of course, this is extended over because when diplomacy is done properly, which is majority of the time, it leads to long-lasting peace and alliances. I extend all my contentions over, and I prove their attack case is invalid. Thank you.
Time before neg defense.
I'm Okay, so my opponent said that using soft and hard power is basically the hard power supporting the soft power. But that claim that they use doesn't actually support their reasoning. It actually supports our claim. So their reason for themselves is actually invalid, but it's valid to us. And they also said that with only using soft power, there are consequences because you can put on a sanction. But these economic sanctions are actually a form of hard power. So once again, that is helping us benefit because an economic sanction is a good way to give a consequence to another country. They also said that terrorists come from bitterness caused by hard power. But you don't actually know that the evidence is 100% related to the hard power used. And also, not all countries in the world have to deal with these terrorists. So this doesn't really apply to the resolution as a whole. And they also said that deterrence causes tension, which causes an arms race. And arms races can also be a good thing. This is good because opposite countries want to fight and get the better weapons, and this causes them to be afraid of each other, afraid of who's going to have the advantage. But because their level of weapons could easily kill the whole country, they wouldn't want to start the fight because both of the countries are going to get demolished. They also said that treaties that result from wars are caused, broken treaties resulted from war are caused by the actual war. But they gave no evidence to support this reason, and they didn't tell us, at all how this was related to the war itself.
My summary speech will start now. All right, so then in this summary speech, I'm going to compare the two worlds of pro and con. In a con world, let me bring up this point again, the powder keg. The powder keg builds up is a buildup of tension. When let's say we use hard power and go in and kill a terrorist, he becomes a martyr, and more terrorists join. That adds to the tension in the powder keg. And if we have deterrence, this deterrence creates a stalemate. This stalemate adds to the tension in the powder keg, and this stalemate could also lead to an arms race because the other countries will be constantly trying to break the stalemate, and that just adds to the tension. And the tension builds up and builds up and builds up in that powder keg. And that powder keg just can't hold that tension until it eventually explodes. And this explosion is a conflict, a worldwide conflict in the status quo now. And in this status quo today, in the world, the world is filled with nuclear weapons. And if that powder keg explodes now through the use of hard power, then the effects will be catastrophic because it'll end in worldwide nuclear war. And the world would just be devastated. Almost no life would be left on Earth if we end up having a worldwide nuclear war, which is why we cannot use hard power to solve all our problems now. But let me show you the alternative: a pro world, a world where we achieve solutions to our problems through diplomacy, not just rushing in and using hard power to impose ourselves on other countries, but to reach agreements with other countries and to have a win-win solution with mutual gain. And when we have mutual gain, it creates alliances, strong alliances. And these alliances create harmony and peace. And let me just say that one really big point this debate really boils down to is whether or not we are able to argue that soft power and hard power can be used. And I'd like to argue that we can, because when we use soft power and hard power, we argue that soft power is still the driving force is still the greater force in this relationship. Hard power may drive it through. The soft power is the one that sets the standard for the resolution. And this is why, Judge, you must affirm the resolution.
Would you all like any prep time?
Yeah, we'd like to run.
So one thing I think this debate really centered around was deterrence and how exactly that worked. And I would just like to address the powder keg analogy, with an example of the Cold War. Probably one of the most famous arms races that ever happened, and this was when nuclear weapons were still kind of new, and they still knew not to fire. Through years, they still did not fire because they knew that it would be mutually assured destruction. And this example just proves that people know, people will listen when they know that they might be destroyed. Our points are also defended and have considerable impacts. And most of their points assume that military force would fail, which is an unfair assumption that that does not work. And well, our points, like I already said, our points still stand, and this is why I hope you vote for con.